James got laughed out of a job in front of a homeowner and a realtor because a cheap smart lock he did not install failed again. The realtor said maybe hire someone more modern next time. James packed up his picks, nodded, and walked to his van feeling that hot shame you get when you know you did nothing wrong but you still wear it. 2 hours later he was buying a heavy vintage door for $40 behind a salvage store in Milwaukee, mostly because he needed something solid to practice mortise work and to clear his head. The place was a building materials resale spot near Walker Point, the kind where old hardwood and mismatched knobs sit in rows and everyone has a story. The door was tall, walnut, with 3 coats of paint slapped over details somebody once cared about. A teenager helped him load it and said, "That thing is cursed." James said, "It is just heavy." Back at his shop, he set it on padded sawhorses and started stripping hardware. The first mini-climax was small but real. The bottom hinge screws were not standard. They were long, new, and set at an odd angle, like somebody had rehung the door in a hurry. Then he noticed the weight did not match the thickness. Felt too dense near the lock style, like something was layered inside. He ran his hand along the edge and found a faint seam under paint. Not a crack inward but a straight line that stopped and started. He grabbed a utility knife, scored along the seam, and worked the tip into it. Something gave with a dry pop. A thin panel, perfectly matched grain, shifted a millimeter. His phone buzzed. The same realtor from earlier had left a voice message that was basically a brush off. James deleted it, stared at the panel, and decided he was done taking hits for other people's bad decisions. He slid a putty knife in, pried gently, and the panel came free like a book cover. Inside was a shallow compartment lined with old felt and sawdust. There was a small black device tucked in a plastic sleeve. It was labeled Treasure. James did not reach for it right away. He just stood there with his hands hovering, listening to the quiet of his shop, hearing his own breathing. Then he saw something else jammed behind the felt. A folded paper, tight creases, like it had been opened and re-folded 100 times. He unfolded it and saw a list of words in neat block letters. He knew enough to feel the floor shift under him without any mysticism. It was either worthless or it was a problem he could not ignore. The first obstacle was his own head. Every story online says you found a wallet, call it in, do the right thing. Nobody tells you what to do when what you found might be digital money, might be nothing, might be somebody else's life savings, and might get you accused of theft either way. James took a breath, put the device back in the sleeve, and locked it in his shop safe. Then he did the boring thing. He called the Milwaukee police non-emergency line and asked how to report found property that was not cash and not a firearm. The dispatcher sounded tired. She asked, "Is it a weapon?" "No." "Drugs?" "No." "Then what is it?" He said, "It is a hardware wallet like a storage device." There was a pause and she said to bring it to the district station with an incident report. That was mini-climax 1 because James realized the moment he handed it over, he might never see it again, even if it was legally his later. So he called a friend who did not get excited easily, a notary named Carla whose office was near the courthouse. Carla said, "Do not touch the contents. Document what you found. Take photos. Write down where and when. Then file a report." She also told him to check his purchase receipt and the salvage store's paperwork, because if the door was sold as abandoned property, there would still be a chain of custody. James drove back to the salvage store and asked for details. The manager, a guy named Victor with paint on his boots, shrugged. Came from a house cleanout in West Allis. Contractor dumped a trailer load. "We buy by the pallet." James asked for the contractor name. Victor got defensive. "You think I am running a crime ring with old doors?" Mini-climax 2 hit when a man in a hoodie, another buyer from the yard, overheard Treasure and started hovering. He said, "Those things hold crypto. You should let me take a look." James kept his voice calm. "No thanks." The guy smirked and said, "People get stupid over that stuff." James watched him leave and felt the tension turn physical, like his shop door suddenly mattered more. That night James did what he could without crossing lines. He looked up the Treasure model, read how it works, and learned the hard truth. The device alone meant nothing without the recovery seed. Then he remembered the folded paper. He had not typed the words. He had not even counted them. He had only seen enough to know what they were. He slept badly and woke up with one decision. If this was going to blow up, he would rather be the person who did it clean, not the person who tried to be clever. He treated the door like a job, not like a lottery ticket. In the morning he laid out nitrile gloves, a clean tray, a small flashlight, and his phone set to airplane mode. He pulled the door down again and inspected the compartment. The edges were router smooth, the felt was glued with old contact cement, and there were 2 tiny brad nails that had been painted over. Somebody had built it, not stumbled into it. He eased the paper out and laid it flat. It was a standard list length. The graphite was smudged at the folds, like it had been handled under stress. He did not say the words out loud. He photographed the paper, photographed the device serial, photographed the door, and photographed the receipt from the salvage store. Then he put everything back and drove to the police station. At the desk, the officer gave him a look that said, "This is not my favorite kind of paperwork." James said, "I bought a salvage door. I found a hidden compartment with this device and a recovery phrase. I want to report it as found property." The officer blinked, then asked, "So is it like a flash drive?" James said, "Kind of, but it might have money on it." The officer's posture changed right away. Mini climax 1 was the moment they took it to the back and asked him to wait. He sat under fluorescent lights listening to a vending machine hum, thinking about how easy it would be for this to disappear into a drawer. 20 minutes later, a sergeant came out and said they would log it, give him a receipt, and contact him if an owner came forward. James asked if he could keep the door itself. The sergeant said, "The door is yours. The device is evidence of found property." Mini climax 2 came the next day when Carla called. She had looked up Wisconsin's found property process and told him the basic truth. If no one claims it after the notice and the hold period, it can be released. But the recovery phrase complicates it, because possession of the phrase could be treated as access. Carla told him to seal the phrase with her, dated and notarized, to prove he did not use it before the report. James did it the same afternoon. The paper went into an envelope, signed across the flap, and placed in Carla's office safe. Then the third mini-climax arrived by email from the salvage store. Victor had found the contractor name after all, but he wrote it like a warning. "The contractor is touchy. Do not bring my business into your drama." James stared at the name and recognized it. He had quoted lock work for that crew before. They had laughed at his price and gone with the cheapest guy in town. James realized this was now about more than a device. It was about who would try to claim it once the word got out. A week later, someone did try. James got a call from a blocked number. A man said he heard James had found something in a door and he could make it worth James's time to hand it over. James asked, "Who are you?" The man said, "Just someone who knows what that is." James hung up and drove straight to the station to add the call to his report. The officer on duty told him something that tightened his stomach. There had been a theft report tied to that West Allis cleanout, not about the door, about missing electronics from the same property. Now James's name was attached to the timeline. He was not a suspect, but he was a person of interest in the sense that everyone was nervous. Mini-climax 1 was the moment James's shop got a surprise visit from the cheap locksmith who had been undercutting him. A guy named Ray. Ray leaned on the counter and said, "Heard you got lucky." James said, "I got paperwork." Ray laughed and said, "Paper does not buy you a new van." Then he pointed at the door on the sawhorses and said, "You sure there is not more in there?" James waited until Ray left, then moved the door to a storage unit and changed his shop locks that same day. Not because he expected a break-in from a rival, but because he was tired of being casual about risk. Mini-climax 2 came when the police called and said an attorney had contacted them on behalf of an estate. The previous homeowner had died. The house was handled by a distant relative and a clean-out crew. The attorney wanted a description of the found item. James felt the situation tilt again. An estate claim sounded legitimate. It also sounded like a fight. Carla advised him to respond through her office. They asked for proof the device was part of the estate and proof the claimant had any knowledge of it. Weeks passed. The attorney sent letters. None included the serial number or any specific detail about the hidden compartment. It read like a phishing attempt. Then, out of nowhere, the police called again. The claimant had withdrawn. No explanation. The hold period continued. James stopped enjoying his coffee. When the statutory period ended, the department released the device to James with a form that made his hands sweat. He signed, took it home, and went straight to Carla. She cut the sealed envelope open in front of him and logged the time. It felt like defusing something, not like opening a gift. They brought in a third person, an accountant named Miguel who specialized in small business taxes and had dealt with crypto reporting. Miguel said, "Step 1 is to verify what is there without making it look like laundering. Do everything with records. Use a compliant exchange. Keep screenshots and transaction IDs." Mini Climax 1 was the first time James powered the Trezor. The screen lit up with that bland little logo. No fireworks, just a device waiting. James entered the recovery seed in the way the instructions required, carefully, checking each word. When the wallet loaded, there was a balance. Not infinite, not a fantasy number, but enough to make his mouth go dry. Mini Climax 2 was the exchange flag. When James tried to transfer a portion to a regulated exchange account, the transfer went through on chain. Then the exchange put a temporary hold for review. James sat in his van outside his shop staring at the email that said enhanced verification required. He drove to Miguel's office with his paperwork folder like it was a passport. Miguel and Carla helped him submit the police release form, the notary log, the purchase receipt for the door, and a written statement of events. It was not fun. It was the opposite of fun. 3 days later, the hold lifted. The ethical dilemma was not about keeping it. The law had played out. The dilemma was how far to go. James could cash out everything. He could also keep it in crypto and hope. Miguel asked him a simple question. "What do you actually need?" James said, "I need to stop being one bad month away from closing." So he cashed out a conservative amount, paid taxes set aside immediately, and left the rest untouched for later decisions. Then he did the thing that tells you who he is. He paid for certification exams he had postponed for years, the ones that let him bid on bigger jobs and get onto vendor lists. He paid the fees, the prep courses, and the travel costs to test. He upgraded his insurance. He bought a better safe. No sports car. No online bragging. The last mini climax of this part was Ray seeing James's new certification badge on the shop wall and going quiet for once. A few months later, James's workdays looked different in small ways. He still did rekeys and late-night lockouts, but he also got calls from property managers who used to ignore him. He passed his certification exams on the first try, not because money makes you smarter, but because he finally had the time and calm to study after work instead of chasing every last job. The door stayed in the storage unit for a while, then he brought it back and repaired it properly. He filled the hidden compartment, not because he wanted it to vanish, but because he wanted it to be a door again. He stripped the paint, oiled the walnut, rehung it in his shop as the door to a small back office. It was a private joke that also reminded him to keep records. The estate attorney never resurfaced. The blocked calls stopped. Milwaukee kept being Milwaukee, winter slush, parking tickets, neighbors who watched too hard. James did not become famous. He did not want that. The dignified resolution was quieter. He learned that luck is real, but it is only the first shove. The rest is paperwork, restraint, and showing up for the boring steps when nobody is clapping. And if anyone ever asks him about that vintage door, he does not say it changed his life. He says it paid for the version of his life that should have been possible all along.